Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another Writing 2 presentation. This one is for the proposal project about the solution section. You can follow along to this presentation by looking through the book, pages 162 through 172. In the middle there's an example of a type of proposal, more of an academic paper than what we're doing. But we are going to be getting different pieces from around this chapter. It may not follow a direct line in this PowerPoint, but much of this PowerPoint does come from ideas drawn from the chapter. You can follow along to this presentation by looking through the book, pages 162 through 172. In the middle there's an example of a type of proposal, more of an academic paper than what we're doing. But we are going to be getting different pieces from around this chapter. It may not follow a direct line in this PowerPoint, but much of this PowerPoint does come from ideas drawn from the chapter. As we get into the solutions section, we're now moving from the first really super important section of our paper, project, document, whatever you want to call it, to the next really important section. So we've already established that there is some kind of a need or problem or an opportunity, and we've used evidence and research to show, again, either that a problem exists or that a need exists, or in the case of an opportunity, it might kind of blend those things together and saying, hey, these are things that may not be urgent needs that you're aware of, but these are really good things that we can provide research and evidence to show that it would be a really positive thing if we did this. So now we move into the section where we describe what the solution to all of this is. As we do this, we want to make sure that we're using concrete details, and we're going to work through the rest of this list as we get into this presentation. Make sure that you listen through here and think about possible topics that you might want to do for this project. With concrete details, we're talking about the same basic approach we talk about in other areas of our writing class that we've been working on in Writing 1 and Writing 2, right? We're going to add details rather than just have vague generalities. And one of the reasons that we push that in our academic writing is because it's good for practical professional writing as well. When you're presenting an idea to the decision makers, they want to hear about specifics, not just your vague ideas and platitudes. If you don't know what that means, I'll let you look that up. Because with those details, it shows that you've actually put some thought into the issue. And as you're making your recommendations, you want to keep them specific enough that really your decision makers and your audience can start to visualize what this is going to look like in their heads. Now, as you move along, you might need to be a little bit flexible about what some of these concrete details are and how it looks, because as more people get involved in the process, especially decision makers, they're going to add their own twist to it. They're going to say, well, I saw something else here, and maybe this would be a good idea. And one of my professors used to always say, love your work, but don't be married to it. And I think that applies really well here, is you're going to come up with really good details you like, but just understand that as things go on, you might get other ideas. And your colleagues may come up with other ideas as well. As we write our solution, then, we're going to think about who our audience is and keep them in mind. And you'll want to do that with your project as well, as much as you can. That's maybe a little tougher with this project because you won't have specific decision makers in mind. Possibly you could. But you want to think about what their priorities are going to be. And so think about them and, what have they valued over time? What have they tended to support a little bit more? So, for example, if you're thinking about your company or organization and you think some new technology or software could really make a positive difference, you want to think, well, have they traditionally supported new software and technology? Are they pretty open to this? If so, that means your job might be a little bit easier here. Otherwise, you're going to have to make sure that you emphasize more in your solution why this is a big deal and perhaps why this is a better idea than some of the things that may have been proposed in the past that didn't work out. You want to show how the solution is going to benefit them and help them meet your goals. And again, think about who your audience is. If you're doing this for a company where the main goal is to make money, okay, show them how this is going to make them money or save money. Perhaps you're doing this for a nonprofit organization. They still are going to care about money. They're also going to care about mission. And that's not to say some companies that are mostly out to make a profit don't have a mission as well. But that's going to be probably a stronger priority for a nonprofit organization. So, for example, if I'm proposing something for Ancilla College, one of the things that I really focus on is how this is going to help students, and particularly how this is going to help students who may not have a lot of advantages coming into college, how this is going to help students who may not have a lot of money or who may have had a difficult background, because that is a big part of our mission. So that's going to be a big part of what I focus on. Part of writing your solution will be to show how your solution meets specific points that you made already in your previous section. So whether you were identifying a problem or a need, or looking at an opportunity and how maybe an opportunity would help you fulfill some perceived needs, you will be able to coordinate that up a little bit, and especially you can focus on the cause of the problem when possible. A couple of examples with that. One might be, for a while I served on the board of a local nonprofit called Wild Rose Moon. It's a music and other arts organization in downtown Plymouth, and they want to promote downtown Plymouth, but they especially want to promote the arts, and they have a lot of concerts there, and they have other programming. Sometimes they'll hold square dancing and things like that, and they do jam session groups and improv for people. So they do a lot of different things, and they film and record a radio show that's actually on some of the local NPR stations and other local radio. So in thinking about them, one of the things that comes up is how can they engage a younger generation? Most of the people who were part of the forming of it were people who were basically baby boomers. And I was one of the younger people on the board. I'm not somebody who has a lot of money, but I have had good partnerships and friendships with the person who's the director and kind of the founder in the past. And so one of the things that you might think about is whether it's a problem or an opportunity. Not sure how we would define that exactly, but if they said, hey, really, we want to reach out to the younger generation, that'll help us sustain this organization for the next however many years. So let's say that's the problem or opportunity, whatever you want to call it, is to engage a younger generation. You might think about, well, what are some of the causes? Why might a younger generation not be as likely to show up for as many concerts? And you'd have to think about who that younger generation is. Are we talking teenagers and talking people who are in their 20s and 30s? Maybe we're kind of casting a wide net there. But you'd want to think about why they're not going. And, for example, some people may not be going because in the evenings when they would go to a concert, they are taking care of their children. And childcare, might be expensive, or, otherwise just something an extra thing that they would have to plan. So is that something that you can really work around to get people to come to concerts? Maybe, maybe not, but that might lead to a solution. Maybe you're talking about teenagers and college students. And college students, I realize, aren't just 18, might be even into their 20s. We can extend that and say young single adults, right? They may not necessarily have family concerns. They may have jobs in the evenings that they would have to work around, but they could even get a day off to go to a concert they really wanted to, but maybe they don't have as much income and money that they would spend $20 for a concert. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. So maybe we address that cause by having discounted tickets, or find other ways to make it more of a value for them. Maybe we also look at the fact that, well, much of the music that we're bringing in appeals to a certain population. Maybe we look specifically and talk with some people in a younger generation about what they would come see at a venue. So by addressing the cause, then that's going to help you coordinate. And so when you come to the solution, you could provide solutions like, discounted tickets, or a program for college students, or targeting, acts that young adults are more likely to get into and do your research about that way. Another example for coordinating is showing how your solution serves the mission of the organization. And we've talked a little bit about that in this presentation already, but let's get more specific here. Let's say that we are working for local Boys and Girls Club, and we might look in their mission and see that they are focused on helping children learn things, right? And also have opportunities that may not be open to them because they tend to reach out and be available for more lower income families as well. So perhaps if we're talking about maybe an arts education program for those children, well, taking art lessons might be costly for children. They wouldn't be able to do it, and their parents would see that as just one more place they would have to cart them around and one more person they would have to pay. If that were available at the Boys and Girls Club, that would allow them to serve that same population of children and do it in an educative way. And especially if you look at, educative is a word, but we'll just pass by that, especially if you look at the fact that arts tend to be decreasing in some local schools. So that might be, some part of their need as well. And so that would, again, be serving if education is a part of what their mission is. And again, I haven't looked specifically at the Boys and Girls Club. Maybe they don't list education, but hopefully this example helps. And you can see how coordinating is a really big part of what we're going to want to do with. We talk about this in a couple of different sections here, but one thing to think about is how you're going to revisit past solution attempts. And again, our book on page 170 talks about examining prior solutions. And I encourage you to look through that paragraph. Pretty sure I mentioned that in the last presentation too. But that's important because you want to see if your solution is even going to be taken seriously if the organization just tried something similar a year or two before. And some people have put a lot of work into things only to find out that, nope, we tried it before and it didn't pass, or we did implemented it, but it didn't work. So if you're going to go through with this, you really want to study that and figure out why it didn't work, or why it didn't pass into the implementation phase where it was approved to go forward, and figure out if you really want to do this. Now, for this particular project, you may not have as much on this because you won't be as intimately familiar with a specific organization in a lot of cases, unless you have years and years of experience with something, maybe not. But I do encourage you to at least look at what you can do with this section. And just because something hasn't been approved in the past doesn't mean it won't be in the future. Ancilla College talked about dorms and looked at several different possibilities for dorms and student housing before we finally went forward on what we have now. But there were times in years past where it had been brought up, and we brought in people with ideas and it was voted down, and then we just didn't talk about it for a year or so. And again, that's more in the board level than faculty, so I don't know what all happened with that. But that's an example of finally someone came up with a proposal that seemed like it was going to work, and the college went forward. So just because it hasn't worked in the past or wasn't approved doesn't mean you shouldn't move forward. You just want to be able to address those issues as you work on your own. One way to show that you've really thought this through is to consider reasonable alternatives and provide some information about that in your solution section. And part of this project might be looking at what different communities or other organizations have done and look at how they've solved this issue or solved this problem. And that's something that we at the college level do within our own college. That's something that we do at Ancilla College, and a lot of places do. They look at what's worked elsewhere, right? But they also look at, well, maybe this worked elsewhere, but here's where it has some issues, or maybe here's where it wouldn't apply to us. But it shows that you've done your research and you've really thought about it. One example here, maybe you're concerned about the fact that cars speed up and down 9B Road. For those of you who are on campus, and you're watching this maybe in the online class, maybe you haven't really visited campus much and observed this, but the road that's kind of right alongside the college and between the college and parking lots, and the parking lot and the student housing and the food service area, and the student center basically, there's a road where people kind of fly up and down that. And sometimes it's students, sometimes it's local residents, sometimes it's other people who work on this campus. But that can be a problem. And so you might be looking to solve that, and you might look at some of the different possibilities. And of course, you're going to look at cost, but you might look at alternative. Well, you might say, well, this college had that problem, so they hired an extra security officer to, sit there in a vehicle and monitor it. And even just the presence of that vehicle made a lot of people look twice and slow down, and they could ticket them if that was a problem. Well, we might look at that if we're talking about Ancilla College. Maybe we would look at that, but we would have to look at what Ancilla College's security situation actually is. And I'm not trying to make fun or degrade that, but we have sort of a different setup here that maybe that wouldn't be practical. Maybe that wouldn't be a good use of time, or maybe that would cost more money than another solution. But at least by looking at that and saying, well, this is a consideration, it shows that you've thought through things. You're not just biased or coming up with only one solution and not really thinking it through. As you work on your solution, then you would also want to be realistic. And this is going to help lead you into the next section about how you're going to actually implement your solution. But you want to think about what can be achieved with available resources. And some companies have plenty of resources and love spending money on marketing and other things. Odds are you're probably going to wind up in a position with a company or nonprofit or somewhere else where they have budgetary constraints. And so you're going to want to think about, what are my resources? What can I do? And what's doable? One example that comes to my mind is some students came to me and said, hey, we're really interested in learning about technology and podcasting. They had some political thoughts and other things that they wanted to maybe learn how to share on a podcast. And they came to me because I teach journalism here sometimes, and because I just have an interest in various things. They were directed to me. So they came to me about starting a podcast club and setting up a place where they could record podcasts. Well, we really didn't have much money to work with, but the college had some resources. I won't get into tons of specifics, but we did have some resources available through another grant to improve some technology around here. And we worked with our administration to find some solutions that, while they were not perfect, and ultimately another organization and department needed our room, but we did set up a place to do some really cool podcasts and to do some really good stuff. And again, we had to be realistic about our expectations. We weren't going to go out and spend $1,000 on equipment. We weren't going to go out and build a studio or refurbish a room completely for an awesome studio. We worked with what we had. So as you're talking about a solution and what that solution is going to be like, yes, absolutely use concrete details. And we're kind of looping back to the beginning here. But when you're using those concrete details, you want to be realistic about what it could look like based on the resources that your place has. Now, when you're working on your project specifically for this class, you may not be completely aware of what the resources that your organization has. And this is going to be something where you'll just have to use your best judgment. And even though maybe you would come up with an idea and they would say, oh, no, we don't have the resources for that, we're going to kind of suspend disbelief and try to be reasonable. So like if you have an idea about, Ancilla College needs this, and well, it will only cost $1 million to build this addition to the building to have our brand new recording studio for the podcast. Yeah, let's be a little bit more reasonable, but let's think it is possible people could get a grant for some technology. So if you do have ideas and you're like, well, we could fundraise for that money or whatever, I don't want you to be too bound by this for this project. I don't want you to feel like you can't do something that you would be really interested in because you don't know if it's realistic. Communicate with me if you have questions about that, but I'll usually try to help you come up with an explanation for it and make it work. Thanks for watching this presentation, everybody. I'm really excited to see how your projects are going to work out. As always, if you have questions or concerns, please contact me as soon as possible, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, everyone.